bringing you all the latest Nottoway County High School and Bearcat sports each week.
10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45.
Starring Aaron Sorensen and John Dykstra on the Maryville Forum Sports Podcast.
He ran it back 109 yards. They're not going to keep him off the field.
Coming to you from the campus of Northwest Missouri State University.
Welcome back to another edition of the Maryville Forum Sports Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Aaron Sorensen, here with John Dykstra. We're going to kind of kick it right off with some Bearcat sports. Bearcat football traveled to Lindenwood this weekend and picked up the 38-17 win over the Lions. John, what did you see from that game?
Just a really balanced offense going out there. Coach Wright talked about all week how he wanted more consistency out of the offense. They really got that by spreading the ball around, scoring 38 points with Braden Wright only having 148 passing yards and nobody having over 100 rushing yards or 100 receiving yards. That's pretty impressive when you're able to still score that many points and not have one guy just completely go off. So the offense took some more strides this week, I think, and continues to look good going into kind of the stretch run here.
Yeah, and it's definitely exciting to see all these guys kind of playing a role in it. One thing that I noticed that we've kind of talked about a few weeks in the past is a lot of times Northwest might have kind of a slower third quarter for whatever reason that might be, which Lindenwood kind of forced them to go in the third quarter. Lindenwood had 10 points, but the Bearcats had 14 points in the third quarter, 14 in the second as well. So how does that kind of feel for the Bearcats to come out right before halftime, punch it in a couple times, and then come right back after halftime and do the same thing?
Well, yeah, that was the big momentum turn there because they did have those 14 right at the end of the first half and then came back. And a big reason that they were able to come back in the second half and maybe why that yardage wasn't as high is because special teams was outstanding. It was a big return early, 57-yard return by Sean Bain. And after that, Lindenwood was simply scared to kick to him. So LaTroy Harper was the up man. And when they pooch kicked it, LaTroy, it went right to him a couple times. And he had two long returns. One he brought inside the red zone for Lindenwood. So that set him up with a couple short fields and really helped that offense get clicking. And just overall, they were able to spread it out, especially in the running game. Raymond Thomas had one of his best games of the year so far. Isaiah Strayhorn and Josh Caldwell did what they do and were able to grind out some yardage for him. Isaiah had a couple short touchdowns, so they just looked really good out there. Braden ran the ball too. Coach Wright mentioned after the game that he had a couple more designed runs for him, which is interesting to see that they're implementing more of those. So, yeah, just the offense really got clicking and really had a good game.
Yeah, and it's exciting to have a quarterback who we've talked about just being kind of so athletic, being able to move on his feet and do a lot of different things. But let's kind of flip to the other side of the ball here. Defense had another pretty good day. First quarter shutout and fourth quarter shutout. What have they kind of been doing? You know, we've talked about kind of switching things up a little bit and injuries that have kind of hurt this defense, but they don't seem to show it at all.
Yeah, and they're starting to get healthy still. They're still missing guys, Andy Hessler and Jacob Gassman, obviously, but they're just getting healthy in the right spots, and those guys who have been forced into playing time are just getting more experience. They gave up a rushing touchdown on the option, and I know they just don't give up many of those, obviously, with the streak that ended last week, so they really buckled down on that option after that. And Lindenwood, they've been struggling this year, but they've been scoring points against everybody. So to hold them to 17, that seems like almost a lot for this Bearcat defense to give up. But Lindenwood's a solid offensive team, so to hold them down like that, that's a good performance. And now hopefully carry that momentum onto the road again. They've got the longest road trip. Well, Edmond might be longer, but they got to go all the way to Tahlequah this week, so that should be an interesting one.
Yeah, and that's Northeastern State. That kickoff is at 2 o'clock. Real quick, let's just look one further week ahead on November 3rd. They've got Fort Hays State at home, Senior Day. Do the Bearcats kind of take this last little kind of road trip in between to kind of really refine things so they can come home and be ready for the Fort Hays team?
Yeah, to touch on Northeastern State, because they kind of had their Super Bowl this week. They played Missouri Southern, and a game that the last couple of years has been for 11th place in the in the MIAA, and they lost this year. They had been beating Southern in that game, so they are still winless. So the Bearcats just have to go down there, and if they can take care of business, you should see a lot of Joe Bannon and Jaden Kowalski this week. So hopefully we can get some of those backups in the game and playing and see how we can do this week, because as you said, next week is going to be probably for the conference title. Fort Hays State obviously comes in with, or has just 2 losses going into this week. And, they'll be pumped up to come back to Maryville, where they were able to get a win and clinch that conference title last year. So they haven't been that impressive this year, especially defensively, where they kind of hung their hats last year. But they have the leading passer in the MIAA, and they have a top 4 rusher in the MIAA too. So offensively, they might even be more potent than they were last year. So we're obviously getting to more of that game next week. But, Fort Hays State's definitely looming there, and a chance to lock up the conference title.
Yeah, and I think a lot of fans are excited, especially even just to have the football team back at home for another game. But let's kind of keep it moving here with Bearcat Sports. Volleyball was on the road this weekend. Played Lindenwood on Friday, completed the sweep with a 3-and-out win. Headed to Central Missouri on Saturday. That was a 3 o'clock game. Ended up taking the loss there, 3-1. UCM kind of holds that 5 spot in the MIAA right now, just 1 game behind the Bearcats. Now the Bearcats are at that 4 spot. Talking to some of the girls after the game, they kind of just talked about maybe not being in a flow as much as they wanted to. Maybe there wasn't quite a flow going there. And Tuesday they played Mo West, and last Tuesday 1-5, but that was kind of the theme too. In a couple games there wasn't really a flow, so I think this having a couple days off, waiting to go until next week, kind of get those girls back in practice, kind of get a flow going, because UCM, tip your hat to them, because they've always been a pretty constant, steady team in this MIAA. But tough loss for them. They look ahead next week. It's senior weekend. But one thing about this MIAA that's pretty crazy is a lot of these top 4 heavy hitters that we've talked about, Washburn, UCO, Nebraska Kearney, and Northwest, they all kind of play each other here in the last couple weeks of this regular schedule. Washburn beat UNK last night. Washburn still has Central Oklahoma, Pitt State, and UNK still has UCM, UCO. So a lot of these tough teams, kind of the top 5, still have to play each other, and there's about 1 game between the top 5 spots. So we could see a lot of things change before the tournament.
Yeah, you've got that ebb and flow of the volleyball season here, with taking the loss this week, coming off a big win over Washburn. So we could quickly kind of change that narrative again going into next week if you pick up a couple big wins on, like you said, senior weekend. So definitely exciting as we continue to get closer to the MIAA tournament here.
Yeah, and I know that's one thing that this team and Coach Worth has been looking forward to, is to get back to that tournament and kind of prove themselves and write a different ending to the season than what they've seen the last few years. So just kind of keeping it rolling again. I mean, it seems like we've been very busy. We're going to head over to the soccer team, the Northwest soccer team. That takes me to my athlete of the week. This week, Northwest Soccer was able to play Southwest Baptist, get the 3-2 win, and Emily Madden will be my athlete of the week. Emily Madden's been pretty strong for this team for quite some time, and for them to get the win is always a good thing, but Emily was scoring goals left and right, it seemed, and she was really kind of a key to get that win. They even talked about her 3rd goal was a nice little hat trick. I saw the video on Twitter, so she's been one of those pieces that kind of probably trying to force that new change and a new culture shift in this program.
Yeah, she just to get that win for the program, that's a big thing going into. They've been obviously looking for that all season now. So for Coach Mark Gordon to have that win, to kind of give them a little bit of confidence going into the last part of the season here, that's just got to be a great feeling for them.
Yeah, and just real quick, what I want to touch on with Emily Madden being Athlete of the Week, her hat trick is the 7th in school history, and she now ties the school record for goals in one game. So really kind of an exciting team win, as they've struggled and they've just been working to get better every day, but also to kind of notch your name in there with some of the others is probably pretty exciting for her.
Yeah, you normally think of Emily as somebody who more sets up the goals than finishes them, but they've been looking for somebody to finish with not having scored many goals as a team here lately. So to have her step up like that is obviously huge.
Yeah, and it probably definitely was a big kind of excitement for that team to really see that kind of pay off. But we're going to switch gears a little bit here, and we're going to head on over to some high school sports. Let's start it with some Spoofhound cross country.
Yeah, that's my athlete of the week this week with Garrett Dumpke coming through and winning the MEC cross-country individual title, and the Spoofhounds also won the team title on the boys' side. Garrett, who is in his first year out for cross-country, he's a sophomore, played football last year, was actually listed as an offensive guard. So to be an offensive guard and to then come back and win a cross-country conference championship, that's probably a rare feat that not many see. But Garrett, they went down to Savannah last Thursday and were able to come away with it. It was a dominating performance from the Spoofhound boys who going into the year, we weren't exactly sure what to expect. They had guys like Chase Sims and Zach Kaiser back from last year, but they had lost John Holtman and Caleb Fierbacher, their two best runners from a year ago. So with a lot of new faces, you were trying to figure out maybe how good they really could be this year. And obviously with a dominant conference championship, they proved some things last week. They had Garrett, as I said, finished first. And then Zach Kaiser finished third, Chase Sims finished fourth, and freshman Carol Sterling finished fifth. So they had 4 of the top 5 at the MEC meet in Savannah. So that's just a great performance by them. And the girls weren't far off either. The girls have actually only had 4 runners for most of the year until this week. So they hadn't even been able to compete as a team. They did individual things, but they got a transfer student from Atlantic, Iowa come in this week, and she really performed well, as did the whole team, and they finished as the runners-up in the MEC, behind St. Pius and edging out Cameron. Laura Fierbacher led the way there. She took third in the conference, which is up 5 spots from what she had last year, and they ended up with 4 all-conference people as well. So just a good performance overall from the Spoofhound cross-country teams.
Yeah, and like you said, to have so many athletes finishing up in the top 5 for the boys, and the girls doing quite well too. That's very exciting for them to see. But soccer also is kind of keeping it rolling here for the Spoofhounds. I know we've talked a lot about Thomas DeStefano and that whole team, and they've kind of seen some success here.
We'll continue to talk a lot about Thomas until they're done, because they had a big match on senior night on Thursday as well. Thursday was a very busy day for Spoofhound sport, but Thomas ended up scoring 7 goals in their 8-2 win over Lafayette, which clinched them a share of the MEC championship with St. Pius, the team they beat the week prior. So going to the district tournament with a lot of momentum, and in the first round of the district tournament, which will start on Tuesday at Bearcat Pitch, actually, so fans can come down and see the soccer team right here in Maryville and give them a little bit of that home field advantage. But they play Lafayette, the same team they just played in the opening round. Maryville's the 1 seed, Lafayette's the 4. And then if they advance to the championship game, which I fully expect them to do on Thursday, they will get probably Savannah, who's the 2 seed. Benton's also the 3 seed, so it could be Benton. But they will get to play one of those teams on Thursday, which will obviously be for the district title, and which will be very exciting for them. Maryville also played without Jaden Hayes, who we talk a lot about Thomas DeStefano. So if we say Thomas is their kind of most dynamic player, Jaden's definitely second in that regard. So they played without him on Thursday, and they were able to still win pretty easily. So, you can't overlook anybody, and I certainly hope the players don't, but I can a little bit, and I'm looking forward to that district championship game on Thursday. We'll say that.
So kind of keeping it moving here with districts, a lot of Spoofhounds find themselves in district tournaments here, and the volleyball team is one of them.
Yeah, the volleyball team, soccer's the top seed, and volleyball's also the top seed. So their district tournament actually starts on Monday. The Spoofhounds won't be playing on Monday. They get a bye, and so they're starting on Tuesday, and they'll have their game at 5:30 in Cameron. And as the top seed, they will play the winner of the 4-5 matchup, which will go down between Cameron and Lafayette on Monday. And they'll get them on Tuesday, and if they can win that game on Thursday, their play as well, I would guess they would get Benton in the championship game, which would be very interesting because that's a rematch of last year when Maryville was also the top seed, and Benton ended up upsetting them in the district final to advance. So a little revenge if it does come down to those two teams again, and Benton and Maryville have split so far this year, so that will just be kind of the game that everybody will be waiting for in that district if it comes to pass that way.
Teams that have a lot of history with each other, it always makes for a good game, especially when there's weight to the game like a district championship.
Yeah, for sure. And Maryville is coming off finishing second in the MEC. They lost to Pius this week and kind of what ended up being an MEC championship game with both teams undefeated in conference. They lost to Pius. They didn't have their big hitter, Serena Sandell, who was out with the flu. All indications say she'll be back just fine for the district tournament. She was actually in Omaha yesterday on a college visit for basketball to Creighton. So that's an exciting week for her. But now she buckles in for volleyball, and the rest of that team does as well. Who have really grown this year, and I say they lost the district championship game last year, but that's a much different team than what they have this year. Players like Macy Lowe and Serena Sandell are back, but they've seen so much growth from the younger players around them, whether it's Morgan Steckline or Josie Pitts or countless other players, Kelsey Scott. There's just a lot of young talent on that team that's still developing, so it'll be exciting to see what they can do this week.
And it's that time of year, John. It's also district football gets going, so it's going to be kind of quite a few crazy weeks here for a lot of teams.
Yeah, and in addition to district football, the Class 1 volleyball schedule gets going on Monday as well. Well, Maryville has a bye. Maybe you can go check out some of our Class 1 teams because it'll be a triple header over in Tarkio. Nottoway Holt, who's the 4 seed, gets going against South Holt, the 5 seed, so that's probably the premier matchup of the day right there on Monday. They play at 5 o'clock just to get it rolling. And then you're going to have Rockport and North Nottoway in the 2-7 matchup playing at 6 o'clock. And North Nottoway, they played a limited schedule this year, so they're trying to gain some momentum going into districts, but to have a good showing against Rockport and keep it close would be really exciting for that program. Like I said, that's just getting going. And then the 3-6 matchup takes us to Mound City and West Nottoway, which may be a very good game to end the day. Mound City's a little down from where they normally are in volleyball, bringing a 10-13 record into this. So we'll see if the Rockets can put a scare and maybe pull an upset over Mound City. So very exciting day on Monday with all those games going on in Tarkio.
Yeah, and you're not going to have a shortage of events to go watch these upcoming weeks, but let's kind of go head on over to district football. What have we got going over there?
Yeah, district football, like I said, Maryville's the top seed in volleyball and soccer, so why not be the top seed in football as well? And they're the top seed easily in their region in their district after beating Lafayette to finish an undefeated MEC season this year. But they'll be the top seed. They play Northeast Kansas City in the first round on Friday, which will be great. Get them back home to the Hound Pound and see what we can do against them. It'll all be pointing likely towards a rematch with Savannah in the district final game. The semifinal game will be either Chillicothe or Benton, whoever can can win that in the 4-5 matchup. Savannah's likely looming as there's a 2 seed in that bottom half of the bracket, and St. Pius is the 3 seed, but Savannah beat them this week, so if they beat them again in the semifinals, that'll be the Savages this time coming up to Maryville to play the Hounds.
And this week, you know, Spoofhound football, we've talked a lot about their goals and where they're looking to, and when we had Matt Webb on, he kind of talked about keeping going and the different championships they could win. And Spoofhounds did secure the MEC title last week against Lafayette. What did you see from that game, John?
Just they went into it pretty short-handed. Eli Dallas has that knee injury that we talked about last week. Hoping to get him back at some point. I think he may come back in the next few weeks here, but he was out. Starting quarterback Ben Walker was out. Another starting running back, Connor Weiss, was out. And they were playing a 7-1 Lafayette team who you'd think would make a challenge that way, but really they didn't. And the Spoofhounds kind of rolled again. It wasn't the lopsided score you normally see, but really if you watch the game, it wasn't all that close. Tyler Houchin, big in that game with 191 yards rushing, a couple touchdowns. They just tried to pound it right at Lafayette, and Lafayette couldn't stop it for the most part. And a couple younger running backs also got their chance, or I guess not younger in the case of Corbin Cook, he's a senior, but less experience in this Maryville offense coming from West Nottoway last year, where he was kind of the star quarterback, the all-conference kid. Now he's kind of playing his role on this team, but they needed him to step up this week, and he did with the long touchdown run. And then Aiden Colin had 91 yards rushing this week too, a big performance for him. So the Spoofhounds just kind of are finding a way to keep rolling here, and both Cook and Colin talked about how Dallas and Weiss helped them from the sideline and were basically extra coaches for them. So just big to see those guys when they could kind of go into a shell being hurt or whatever, and instead helping the younger guys and making sure that they were able to win that conference championship, which they were. So big week for Spoofhound football as we get ready for that district tournament.
Yeah, and you know, we've talked a lot about how even though this team is so stacked with so many good athletes, that a lot of times they're not racking up maybe huge yards, and they've talked about that's not even what the offense is designed for. But to kind of have a few guys out for Tyler Houchin to get 191 yards, and to have other running backs, as you said, maybe don't quite have as much experience, to still get in there and get the job done is probably a very positive sign for this Spoofhound squad as well as Spoofhound fans, you know, just to prove that they are the real deal all the way around, not in just a few guys.
Yeah, it was a big talk about Tyler being kind of the MVP of that game. The real MVP of that game might be his dad, Matt Houchin, the offensive coordinator, because he found a way to kind of piece together an offense with 2 starting running backs and a starting quarterback. Like I said, that takes a little bit of ingenuity there to come up with a way to still score points. And certainly when you have a powerful runner like Tyler, it makes it a little easier. But they were just able to find ways to get going. Tyler McGarry also had a good day running the ball, who normally just stays on the defensive side of the field as their leading tackler and middle linebacker there. But it was kind of all hands on deck this week, and they were able to get it done. And hopefully we see some of those guys back this week against Northeast. I would doubt we see Eli back yet, just because I don't think you're going to need him against Northeast, or likely in the next game. I would probably have circled that district title game to see if he can come back for that. But as far as Connor and Ben, hopefully we see them back in the lineup this week and can kind of get rolling again. And with Eli out, it's a really big opportunity actually for Connor Weiss, just a sophomore, to kind of take that lead H-back role and see what he can do in these games. So it'll be interesting on Friday night, nonetheless, to see how the Spoofhounds enter district play.
And eventually, you talked about they might run into Savannah again. Is that kind of a game? I know they just had, the Highway 71 showdown, and it was all Spoofhounds all the time. Do you think Savannah comes in a little more focused in that game if that game does end up happening?
I've heard a lot of that, and there's a lot of I would say, excuses coming from some of my fellow media members that maybe cover Savannah a little bit more than they cover Maryville. I had some conversations on the sideline at the Lafayette game this week about turnovers and stuff like that. I mean, Maryville just look dominant in that game, and I don't see any way, especially if they have Eli back, that Savannah can really hang in that game. They weren't able to throw the ball at all, and when you get that one-dimensional against a Matt Webb defense, it's going to be trouble. And they were able to slow down Titan Irvine, who's Savannah's main weapon, and like I said, whenever Chase Spoonamore tried to carry the ball, it seemed like he fumbled whenever he tried to. So I don't know if Savannah's going to even want to go to their kind of secondary option as much in that game, but we will definitely see. They have some time to get a little confidence going here. They, like I said, got a win over St. Pius this week, which isn't surprising at all. And they have a couple more games now as they get ready for that district championship game should they advance. So maybe they get some confidence going and look good, but it was kind of their, as one of my fellow media members put it, it was kind of their Super Bowl last week, and he thought that was why they came out nervous and maybe turned the ball over a little bit more. I think that has more to do with just Maryville's defense and just not being used to being stopped like they were in that game. But we should see, because a betting man would definitely say that will be our district final game. So if it comes down to that, we'll obviously touch a lot more on that in a couple weeks here. But it's definitely exciting to maybe see that rivalry game coming up down the road again.
And it's crazy, all these games, districts are one of a lot of fans' favorite time of the year because you get to see a lot of matchups that maybe sometimes you wouldn't, or maybe like we talked about, kind of see matchups again, teams that won a second shot. What other matchups are you kind of looking forward to, John, as we kind of roll into districts? There's a lot of games going on, so a lot of action, and I'm sure we're going to see a lot of big games.
Well, we can start it off with getting down to the 8-man ranks here. A couple local schools will be taking another shot at each other with South Holt and Ottaway Holt playing Platte Valley this week. And with that game, they played each other once, and South Holt and Ottaway Holt was able to get the win. But you're seeing kind of two teams that do it very differently, with Dalton Luke running the ball for Platte Valley, and he's just had a great season. And coming into that game with their run-heavy attack, that's going to be what they want to do. But the Spartans, led by sophomore quarterback Drew Quinlan, he threw for over 500 yards this week in their win over Northwest Nottoway, and he has just been electric all year, with a couple senior wide receivers with Reagan Morris and Eric Ottman too. So that game is the big matchup of two Nottoway County teams here going into that first week of districts, and whoever wins that will get to play North Andrew in the second round, which North Andrew's not what they once were. I think when we had Anthony Crane on a couple weeks ago, he kind of talked about that, how they're still a good team, but they're not the powerhouse they once were. So if, for instance, the Spartans, who are favored to beat Platte Valley, if they advance to that game against North Andrew, that should be a very good game, as they're the 3 and 2 seeds in that district, which is Mound City's district, who is undefeated for the season. They're the top seed that will be waiting whoever comes out of that bottom half of the bracket for them. That's definitely a good start to our 8-man slate. But if we go over to the other bracket here, Northwest Nottoway, our other local school, they've really made some good strides late in the season and are definitely improving. They've had some closer games, but they're still looking for that first win. So they come in as the 6th seed, and they'll have to go to 3-seeded East Atchison, who is kind of a team that's like right outside those elite teams. They tend to handle anybody who's not in the realm of a Worth County or Stanberry or Mound City, but they struggle against those top teams. So they come in as the 3 seed, and a very talented 3 seed at that. So whoever wins that game will get Worth County, who lost this week for their second loss of the season to Stanberry. Those are a couple top 3 or 4 teams in the state with Stanberry and Worth County. So they're the 1 and 2 seed in that district. So that's a possible district final game that a lot of people will be very excited to see a rematch of again. So just a lot of action going around in the 8-man world and the district football as a whole world as we get ready for Friday night's first round of districts.
Yeah, and like we talked about, all the matchups and a lot of good matchups. I know a lot of times first rounders you get some big seeds against some smaller seeds, and it's kind of a guaranteed, even though sports are never guaranteed. But a lot of good matchups as we kind of progress here through districts for football.
Yeah, I would argue Maryville versus Northeast isn't the best matchup in the world, but certainly, especially when you get to those 8-man schools, because like I said, the top 2 seeds, because of how 8-man districts only have 6 teams in them, top 2 seeds gets a bye, which makes those 4 or 5, and which just makes those other matchups that much better going into that first weekend to see who gets a shot against those better teams. So there's definitely some excitement on that side, and then for Maryville, it's just a matter of taking care of business against Northeast and moving on to the next round here and working our way down the slate where we talked about districts, but they have a possible matchup with Odessa looming in quarterfinals, which would be huge after districts, and a matchup of 2 of the top teams and 2 of the favorites to win a state championship. So that's looking quite a ways down the road, but once we get to that game, that'll be one to buckle in for, and we will, if we get to that game, we will host it here at the Hound Pound as well. So that could be one where that winning streak here at home comes in handy, and hopefully we're able to continue it a few more games here.
And we will definitely have all of those matchups. We'll be back next week with more great sports. We'll talk about Northwest football's road trip. We'll also be back with volleyball's senior day, and we'll catch up with all of these rounds of districts, be it football, volleyball, cross country, soccer. We will have them all here on the Maryville Forum Sports Podcast. We'll be back next week. As always, I'm Aaron Sorensen here with John Dykstra, and we look forward to bringing you more great sports.
Bringing you all the latest Nottoway County High School and Bearcat sports each week.
10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45.
Starring Aaron Sorensen and John Dykstra on the Maryville Forum Sports Podcast.
He ran it back 109 yards. They're not going to keep him off the field.
Coming to you from the campus of Northwest Missouri State University.